So this is just basic training principles. I'm trying not to make this overly or underly complicated. I just made up a word there. But these are some general universal concepts that, whenever it comes to figuring out what we're doing and why we're doing, these are the physiological things that are kind of on our decision-making list, okay? So for any type of training, there's some universal principles that apply, okay? The body has to be basically subjected to a series of stresses in order for it to adapt. Under or overstressing has negative effects, and this is any type of athletics: weightlifting, sprinting, long distance running, hurdling, throwing things, swimming, golf even, you name it, okay? There are very, very strict applications that if we go outside those, one of two things happens. You either have a freak that can handle it, which is even in the world of elite athletics isn't very common, or we have basically the negative reaction to a stress, so we have an overstress, okay, which is an injury, okay? A lot of injuries we see are very, very, very avoidable. Largely, it's really terrible design or terrible implementation of the program. So athletic training is a science. When you design a training program, neuromuscular system, cardiovascular system, musculoskeletal systems are all really involved. And if you don't do those correctly and in conjunction, then you're going to have issues sooner or later. Younger athletes, you guys are all 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. Your bodies are pretty pliable compared to older athletes. And you're also what we consider a little earlier on a training age. So say he's a young kid, he's 17, he's a young kid, he's 17. Training age takes that out of the window because not all 17-year-olds are the same as far as what they're used to do training-wise. You get a kid that's been there 3 or 4 years seriously training versus a kid that's in their first year. What you do with those people is very different because their body is going to react to that very, very differently. If you got a kid that is brand new, you can do literally almost anything to a first-year athlete and they're going to get better. They've never played a sport before. You can go have them do the dumbest stuff in the world and it won't matter because they have an almost unlimited supply of muscle and neuromuscular passageways to recruit. And so when those are gone, after they've trained 2 or 3 years where the super free ones are available, we have to start making little changes. That's when we see performance taper off. The person their first week of track that's never trained is like, oh, I'll drop 2 seconds in the 100 this week. Cool, year 3, you're not going to do that. Okay, it's not going to happen. So we do have to understand, a lot of you have been here before, you go up real fast and then that is going to taper off. But our goal is to make sure we don't taper off completely and go down, okay, which happens a lot. So training age is really, really important. Talent, body composition, desire, all have things to do with it. Some people are more genetically lucky. They are more talented, and it is what it is. That's the way life works. Luckily for most of y'all in the room, all y'all pretty talented, so that helps. Okay? But we have 3 main energy systems that our body uses, okay? And this is universal to everything. You've got your aerobic system, okay? That is where we get our long to medium efforts. Low and medium intensity for sprinters. That's like 200-meter repeats where we're running those at like 70% or 75%. We're just trying to get volume out of those, okay? Those are going to be lower heart rate. They're not a lot of intensity. Distance runners, that's your easy run, okay? We got anaerobic system, which is some people call it the glycolytic system. Those are the mediums. So those are where we've picked up the pace. We're not running those easy anymore. We are now running those 200s at like 80% or 85%, or where you're running, 300s for 300 hurdles without the hurdles, where you're running those once again about 80, 85%. That's where you guys are starting to run at your threshold pace, which is going to be, we'll go into that a little bit later. And then we have our ATP, which is our azinazone, I'm only going to try to say it. I'm going to say lots of Z's and forget the D's in there. Anyways, those are very short efforts of very, very high intensity. That is basically stored inside it's real quick energy in our cells. And what we try to do through training is we try to manipulate how these all work, okay? Different distances are going to do different things. Like, you got 300-meter hurdlers in the room, okay? your training is going to be even different between boy and girl to ideally, once we get to that point, versus a 100-meter runner. Because the amount, the length of the duration of the effort is going to directly result in which one of these systems you're going to end up using and the percentage of them and so on and so forth. Distance running, same way. You're training for a mile versus a 5K. Very different once we get to a point. Now, you got to remember, a lot of us aren't really that far into our training age yet. So with that in mind, it is important to realize that our training is going to be a little more similar until we kind of get to a point where we've kind of started plateauing out. And a lot of you aren't really quite to that phase yet. So we don't need that super specificity yet. But your universal systems, all athletes, pole vault, throws, everything relies on these systems, okay? And here's kind of a basic chart that shows you how this works, where the axis down here, the x-axis is the amount of times. So you can see your ATP, you notice its availability is almost completely gone very quickly versus when you're producing strength and force, 20, 30-second runs, we start getting, the energy usage is much lower. So it's kind of how this works. The longer and the lower you use, it's more aerobic. The extreme quick stuff, it's more ATP, and then your anaerobic or glycolysis system, okay, is kind of the medium ground for a lot of you. Okay, so your cardiovascular system that is your heart and lungs, has to provide oxygen for your muscles to function. When we run out of that is when things happen. Okay, so when we do distance training or whenever we're doing rep work or speed work or whatever for sprinters and jumpers and hurdlers, okay, the biggest thing we have to do is we have to manage where we're keeping your energy systems at, okay? We do that by rest, intensity, and volume, okay? So for 1 to 4 seconds, we're pretty much only using your lactic ATP system. Okay, at that point, you don't actually need any oxygen. You can close your mouth for 4 seconds and run, and it's not going to affect you. Okay, 4 to 10 seconds, we start adding a little bit more, okay, of just the ATP. We start actually pulling real anaerobic glycolytic stuff in there. A little bit longer, we start adding more. We start pulling the muscular glycogen. That is where you guys, that's threshold runs, start kicking in and other things like that once we start getting our heart rates up. And then kind of as it goes, we get longer and longer and longer and the systems change, okay? Your body can only work about 3 minutes on the anaerobic system for you distance guys, 3 to 5 minutes on a big one, okay? So that's why we notice as the energy source is going to change. And one of the things we have to be really careful of, and one of the things that you all, if you want to get better, is you have to make sure you are training in the right system zones. And we'll talk about that here in kind of detail. Okay? So when we train you, rest, pacing, and volume are equally important. If you go too hard long term, it has a negative effect. If you go too hard short term, okay, has a negative effects. Too easy both ways, okay, has some negative effects. The biggest thing that causes what we call overtraining, okay? Short term, you're not going to adapt the way you're supposed to. You're going to run a 300 and you've ran everything and you've not done any of the aerobic stuff. And we know that after about 40 seconds, you're going to run your aerobic system is going to start taking over a lot more and more. If you run that race in 50 seconds and you've been sprinting nonstop, then after about 40 seconds, you're going to be really hurting in that race because you're going to produce tons of lactic acid and you're going to fall off the face of the earth. Okay? Happens. Girls more than boys. That's why boys, 400-meter runners, you train them once they get good very differently than you do girls. Okay? Sydney McLaughlin does very different workouts than like Van Niekerk and the guy in Norwood, and then you ratios get all messed up because the times are changing. Okay, versus elite women, you're running a 60-second 400, totally different than training somebody in a 48-second because your lactic acid production is totally different. Make sense? So short term is what happens. It doesn't work out very good, and then your workouts the rest of the week suck. They're any good. This is the way it's going to be because these things take a long time to recover from. From a heavy, intense workout, it takes at least 48 hours for your body to have any chance to recover. So when you get toasted on a Monday, okay, Tuesday is really only functional as a recovery day. Wednesday, you have a chance to have a good workout again. But if you go hard back to back on the same systems, okay, you're going to have these long-term problems, which is I can't I can't stay healthy. What's wrong with me? Why am I always hurt? Why am I always broken down? You're not giving your body a chance. You're not giving yourself any chance at all. This happens sometimes when we try to do too much. Everybody's, I got to outwork that other guy. That's great. Outworking people is fine. It is something you should strive to do, but it doesn't always necessarily mean doing more. It's not just, I could do something for 10 hours a day. If I do it wrong the entire time, I've not accomplished anything. Probably made things a lot worse. Okay? So long term, our training stagnates. Well, if I'm not training the right systems at the end of the year, well, I'm not getting any better because your workouts haven't been correct. Either the coach did a poor job of showing you what you're doing, or you've not executed, or a combination of both very frequently. Okay, you're going to plateau off. Why have I stayed the same for 3 years? Either you don't have any talent left, or you're not training right. One of the two. Two, you're always hurt. You see those kids that are hurt 24/7? There's a reason they're always hurt. Okay? Their bodies are being made to do something they cannot do. Okay? So there needs to be adjustments need to be made. And long term, my knees don't work. I got to have shoulder replacement, this or that all the time. And the longer you train, we're pushing a little bit more and more, but it happens. And it's weird things you wouldn't think. It's not just I'm tired. It's why am I spraining ankles all the time? Or why is this? Remember, we're training 3 systems. Your cardiovascular system, your neuromuscular system, as well as your musculoskeletal system. So if your neuromuscular system is fried, you've done a lot of heavy jumping activity, right? Then when that's fried, and you go try to do coordination activities, guess what? My coordination is not going to be very good. That's when, why did I land awkwardly? Your neuromuscular system's gone. And it takes a long time to recover. That's what makes you hit the ground and go pop. That's why when you got an event like jumping, a sport that requires a lot of jumping, you don't want them to do a lot of long-term running because long-term running fries that system. And it's not training the right system. So there's a correlation to all of this, which is important, okay? So overtraining happens because of too much volume. You do too much, okay? Heart rate gets too high, microfractures. Why do I have shin splints? Overtraining is a big problem with that because of volume. Why do I have, happens a lot of time in girls, we have stress fractures, okay, especially in the femurs. Happens all the time. It's because they've gone too much. Happens a lot between high school and college. High school and college runners, they'll run a lot and they'll say they run a lot in high school to the college coach, and then they'll go to college and actually do that workout, and the next thing you know, they're in a boot. Okay? Happens all the time. I bet Jacob's probably got a teammate or two that's already sitting in stress fracture. Okay, I've never seen it not happen. Okay? But your neuromuscular system's fried, and you also get why can't I do what I'm supposed to? When you're in the air, you're pole vaulting, you're jumping. My body's not doing what it's supposed to. Yep. Okay? Because we have a disconnect between your neuromuscular system, okay, and what your body's actually feeling. Okay, so too much volume happens. That can be, you got to remember, everything you do counts into that volume. So if you're doing 2 and 3 sports at a time, how are we ever going to recover? Okay, that's something we see more and more. If you're playing the same sport all the time, one of the biggest tragedies we've had in sports is this singular, I've got to play the same sport all year round, 24/7, 365. We overstress the same muscles all the time, and they don't really ever get a chance to fully recover. You only get better when you recover. The workout actually makes you worse until your body gets a chance to recover. Okay? Intensity, get way off, same thing happens as above. Not enough rest between reps, same thing as above. So, when we do a distance workout and it's supposed to be an easy run, like yesterday, for example, was 3-mile easy run on a flat track. Okay, pace was supposed to be 11 and a half minutes for the first 6, so run it in 23, right? So when I run this at 23, this is a steady state 23-minute threshold run, or not threshold run, but easy run. And so when I run that intensity, okay, if I run the right intensity, what actually is going to happen is my body is actually going to feel good. If I run the wrong intensity, okay, then my training zone is going to be off. I've now trained the wrong thing, okay? I've not trained my aerobic capacity. Now I'm training probably my buffer zone because I think they ended up running at 19, so ran it about 20% too fast, which really puts it somewhere around almost a threshold workout, which is not aerobic, which causes other problems, okay? And then not enough rest. So when we go do we ran some 200s yesterday, right? So 200s at 70%. This time of year, basically you're going to add 7 to 10 seconds to what you ran at your peak. So if your peak was at 24, and then you multiply that by 1.3, which is going to be 7.2. All right, so I should run those at 31. 31 is really my quick zone because it's outside, it's cold. 31 to 32. Well, what happens if I'm running them at 30 repeatedly? Well, that looks good, but remember, we're not talking about today. We're talking about the end of the season and into the future. Okay? So you have to think far-sighted, not necessarily short-sighted when we think of these things. So, when we're talking about hit a time, I've beat my times. That's not a good thing. Your goal should be to be at your times, not above those times. And then when we do a test and you perform better, then we adjust times. But going too fast is just as bad as never stressing it enough, because it is a cumulative effect which causes damage long term. Okay. The other thing on here, which is reason 4, is malnutrition. I know we got a lot of multis as far as multi-sports, and I don't think you all largely get a whole lot of explanation of this. But when you exercise, your body turns carbs, quick energy, and then your glycolytic system starts using muscular energy, muscular glycogen, which is glycogen stored in your muscles, okay, to fuel your aerobic and anaerobic needs, okay? So after you finish working out, usually if you were going to take a blood glucose test, you take your blood sugar, it's usually going to be low, okay? It's usually going to be quite low. That's why you see these people run and pass out, their sugar's so low. That's why it's not they're not oxygen, it's their sugars drop that far. So that's why we drink a Gatorade, okay, or a chocolate milk, okay, quick access to sugar. It's pretty useful. In college, we would take 1 scoop of protein powder and 1 scoop of Gatorade powder, take the orange Gatorade with the vanilla protein. It's like an orange creamsicle. It's actually really good, okay? I wouldn't do that otherwise. I love chocolate-covered oranges, but I'm not going to try that, okay? So, but the quick sugar keeps that maintained up. But anytime we work out, all we do is we break down our muscle. We're literally tearing our muscles to pieces. So that's what happens, okay? So when we tear our muscles down and we break our muscles down, how do we rebuild them? Well, you don't rebuild muscle with carbs and you don't rebuild your muscles with fat. So what happens when I've gone all day and not really consumed protein and I go have a practice? Anybody know what happens without reading the board? Oh, no glance. Okay? You break down yourself. Where does your body get the protein? It eats itself. That's what it does. So when you've worked out and your body's now consuming itself for energy, this is a really bad case. 2 things happen. 1, you get really, really weak long term and you break down. And 2, you can be subject to things called rhabdo, which is really, really bad, and you end up being in the hospital. So want to avoid that. Okay? It's your kidneys do weird things, start peeing blood. It happens. It's bad. So malnutrition is something, affects you really, really frequently. So how can we avoid that? Well, there's 3 to 4 main types of available proteins. Milk proteins, egg proteins, whey proteins, which is the quick stuff you used to get out of a can all the time, and then some type of plant and organic. And most of those are all about the same, okay? So casein protein comes from milk. Long term, it's great. Egg protein, same way. Lasts a long time. So if you eat those throughout the day, they're going to last most of what you do. But if you go chug a protein shake in the morning and think that's going to work, most protein shakes, if they're whey protein, after 30 minutes you just pee it out. They don't do anything. They're a weird type of protein, just meant for quick recovery. So when you go to lunch, I know it's not cool, drink a milk, okay? That protein will take 6 to 8 hours to completely get through your body. So it will be available to be used later on throughout the day. Okay? If we don't do these things, once again, why am I always hurt? Why am I not getting better? You give yourself no chance. It would be better not to work out than to work out if you're malnutrition. Okay? Same way with water. When it's cold, we don't want to drink, right? We don't. Dehydration in a 2-mile race is worth about a minute on the bad side of things. So think about that. That's 10%. Makes you 10% slower to be dehydrated. That's not good in any sport. Okay? Plus, raises your heart rate up. We notice that changes other things as well. Okay? So distance runners, you guys follow basically what we call an 80-20 rule. 80% of your running is aerobic. Okay? 20%'s other. And that changes throughout. Okay? So when you run a week, if you're running 25 miles, you basically take that 25 miles in theory, and you multiply it by 0.8, and that's how many miles that week you should run at easy pace, at aerobic pace. Anything more than that, long term, I know I am putting myself, A, I'm going to plateau too quickly, and B, I'm probably going to be hurting. Okay, and that's just going to happen. That's the way. This is the way science works. This is not conjecture. This is 60 years of exercise science that goes into this. Okay, so the cool part about that is, you ever ran before and you got a runner's high? Okay, the reason that happens is because you've ran and you've stayed slow. Like, I know you were a little bit slower than the other day because you were actually a lot closer to your pace. So you're out there running, okay, and I'm sitting here in my aerobic comfort zone. And so when that's happening, my body is able to freely use and refuel itself. And what it's doing when it's doing that, it's all the little lactic acid, all the other fatty acids, all the damage from my broken down cells in my body are getting cleansed out, okay? And so when you're done, why do I feel good? Because I'm oxygenated. I've gotten rid of, we talk about rust. Oxidization happens inside your cells. And one of the craziest things is when your cells start breaking down and producing energy from ATP to ADP, we produce hydrogen, okay? Hydrogen is an acid. That's what really hurts in your body. It's not lactic acid. Lactic acid actually comes from lactate, which is an alkaline. So when you produce the hydrogen in your system, but you can clear it out freely, you have now taken your blood and made it closer to that neutral range, so your body feels like it should. It's not acidic anymore, okay? So when you guys get to marathon pace, we got to get a little, so we're starting to get a little faster. The faster we get, threshold pace, same way, we start getting our heart rates up. We start moving out of that. And your body, from you guys, this is huge for all 4 of you in the room right now. When you start running those 300 hurdles, okay, you're going to start producing fairly quickly lactic acid, especially anything at the about 30 to 40 second level range, okay? So when we do rep work that plays with this a lot, what we do is we try to basically keep your lactic acid production neutral. So that happens, what happens is you can produce and clear enough that you can hold off the negative effects of being really in an oxygen debt, is what happens. Okay, then after that, you run intervals, which is 5K pace, pretty much, you're above it. And you can't do that very long. You can do it maybe 3 to 5 minutes and you start hurting, okay? This is what cross country is really good for. And then you get rep pace, which for you guys is, distance guys, is faster than your normal heart rate. But we play with this a lot. You'll run up, then down. 200 at fast, 200 real slow. Time-wise, your rest is about 3 to 1, and 3 to 1 to 5 to 1. And you guys, for sprinting, okay, it's going to go the same way. I think that's as far as I got, okay? But training and effort periodization. So this is the last couple of like basic things you kind of need to understand, okay? Too much, too fast, you're slow and hurt, okay? Too little, too late, you're going to miss your goals. Same way is going to happen, okay? This is the basic chart for a thing called periodization. And this is what most modern science as far as training goes with. So as my volume is high, my intensity has to be low. If I do high volume, high intensity, you won't see me on this anymore because I'm broken, okay? If we do this correctly, okay, with our skills training, so we start 200, easy 200 rep work, light hurdles, you're going through a couple hurdles at a time. We're not running a full 300 hurdles. As we work, we start doing a little bit less, a little more specific training, a little faster. Same way, a little less, a little faster, a little more skill specific. Now I'm halfway in the season. This is March, or this is April for you guys. We're now in April. We're still stuff's going up. I'm doing less. I'm competing more. By the end of the season, this is where we want to be. So notice workouts will be shorter. They'll be more intense. And in order to do this, we have to have a really longer rest as we go, okay? So rest is what gets our heart rate to the right spot, also lets my energy systems reset, and keeps me in the right intensity levels. So between different events, here's a general breakdown. You guys are about 45 seconds-ish, that's near our goal for you. A little bit slow for what you guys are going to hit. But when you look at that system for you all, Notice you're kind of in the unfun zone of your lactic training, so you're going to do a lot of stuff near the lactic acid threshold and where you can tolerate that and not lock up. Versus you're going to do that a little bit differently if you're a 200-meter runner. You're going to do a little more quick speed training, okay? And so we manipulate these things as we go. Landon, 1,500 to 5K, you notice they're very different. One's a 3.5, 4-minute race to a 15-minute race. Systems are going to change, right? So point being, okay, sprinters, everything you do has different energy system training, different functions. I mean, you wouldn't believe the amount of science and crap we do to make part of these workouts up, okay? But the point of this is that whenever we are training, it is unbelievably important that we, A, show up ready to train, okay? We've given ourselves at least the best chance we have to be successful for that day. And B, whenever we are there for that day, it is hyper important that we hit those target zones. Later in the season, we think you're going to go to a race, right? Races are full effort. So why am I so sore after a race? Well, what do we know from the chart? Okay? If my intensity is at a max, I can't run a lot. If I do this and this together, we're going to have problems, right? So as we get to the season, it's important you all kind of understand how important recovery is going to be for you all. I think most of you in here play multiple sports and do multiple things. So, it's really, really important that when we go do 200s, like y'all squatted on Monday. Okay, football squats on Monday, cool. Those are our 200 days. Why? Well, if you've already done a whole lot of volume, okay, then if I do something intense that same day, like go run 60s full out, can't do that. Can I run 200s that day? Yes, because they are a volume, but they're a low intensity lift or workout. So if I'm running something at 65 or 70%, when I'm having you do 200s, if you do them at the right pace, all those are really doing for you is cleaning your body out. Okay, they're fixing you. So you'll feel a little bit better day 2 than you would day 1, but only if we run those at the right pace. If that makes sense. So a lot of this stuff's really important, and as athletes that are, I think everybody in this room's motivated to do really, really well. We sometimes have this, I got to do more, I got to go faster than I'm supposed to. Once again, we have some universal laws of biomechanics, of physiology that don't change. So when we go against universal laws, there are repercussions, okay? So I really want you guys to kind of understand what we're asking you. When we're asking you to run this slow, why? Here's why, okay? So hopefully I've kind of explained those things through you today. Now, there's a couple biomechanical things I want to talk about. I don't have slides for those really, but especially with hurdlers and distance runners, okay? So whenever we look at things like jumping or running, okay, and this is something I've talked to you guys about several times, but the angles that your shins have a relationship to the ground directly affect what your hips are going to do, okay? So if I'm high jumping, the goal is for my hips to go up. If I'm pole vaulting, the goal is for my hips to go up. Or even long jumping, the goal for my hips is to go up. So if I'm competing in one of these activities, that is a vertical element to it, not hurdling. We do not jump the hurdles. So I want to jump the hurdles. No, you don't. Okay, it's not that fun. I promise you. So the relationship of my shin to my hip, if my shin is ahead of my hip when I take off, now I'll be propelled kind of like a catapult. Okay, I will go up. Versus if I'm trying to get horizontal, like in a hurdle, my shin angle wants to be neutral to back. Because from this angle, my hip will not do what? It will not go up. Okay? So if I've got shin neutral to back, that's why we talk about once you get to that point, doing like a cut step. Eventually you start hurdling, you'll start doing a cut step. Where your 1, 2, 3 is a little bit short and you take off. If 3 is out in front of you, what are we going to do? We're going to elevate and it's going to make a mess, right? But if I'm 1, 2, 3, and it's real tight, down and back quick, okay, then all my energy is going to go quickly through there, bam, bam. That's how I keep my rhythm, okay? You see, a lot of times you'll watch, I want you to go watch at a meet some point this year. I want you to watch a newbie hurdle, okay? It tells you almost everything you need to know about the track. If you look at their takeoff foot, okay, where that takeoff foot hits. If you see it way in front of them, You're going to know before they leave the ground what it's going to look like. 100% of the time. Okay? Pole vault, we want to go up. Well, I'm over the pole before I take off. Do I have any chance to go vertical? Not one, no. It's never going to happen. Anytime we go vertical, laws of biomechanics tell me I have to have foot, okay, and shin in front of the hip. Once it's under, I will not go up. I will keep flat. Okay? So these little things we're really, really preaching, okay, trying to teach you all, because we wonder, I was always somebody that wondered, why am I doing these things? Distance runners, same way. If you're running with your feet out in front, how many times has Louis told you, don't what? No, bounce. You watch Caden run. You watch his head just bobble. Okay? You watch Caden strike. Caden's right here every time. Where's his shin in relation to his body? It's in front. So what's his body naturally going to do every time? It's going to bounce up. That's how this works. Okay? You're going to bounce up because he's trying to push. He's going to push off. And when you push off with your shin, your hips are going to rise. You're going to come up and he's going to fall. And when we fall with our shin ahead, especially landing on our heels, what does that do to our knees and ankles and everything else? It kills them. Okay? So if we want to go forward, we want to be as neutral as possible. Okay? These are things that whether you're a sprinter or a jumper or whatever, if I'm trying to stay flat and steady forward, I want to be neutral as possible. If I want to go up, I should be out in front. If I'm trying to go back, okay, then, or really flat, I'm actually going to try to attack shins back. So these are some basic things that we kind of wanted to go over with you all because I find them interesting, and I hope you guys learn.